Welcome to the Trackpads podcast, your go-to destination for exploring the rich history, strategies, and leadership lessons of warfare. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast and sign up for the weekly newsletter. You can also explore more by visiting trackpads.com. The battle for Mosul, Iraq. The early morning silence over Mosul shattered as coalition airstrikes rained down on strategic Islamic State positions, marking the beginning of one of the most grueling urban battles of the 21st century. Iraqi soldiers, backed by Kurdish Peshmerga forces and an international coalition, prepared to reclaim Iraq's second-largest city, which had been under Islamic State control since June of 2014. The fight for Mosul would be long and devastating, testing the limits of urban warfare and pushing both military forces and civilians to their breaking points. The battle lasted from October 17, 2016 to July 10, 2017, making it the largest military operation in Iraq since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. More than 100,000 troops took part in the offensive, facing off against an estimated 6,000 Islamic State fighters who had spent years fortifying the city. The stakes were immense. Defeating the Islamic State in Mosul would cripple their so-called caliphate and significantly weaken their ability to operate across Iraq and Syria. While hailed as a decisive victory, the battle came at an enormous cost. Thousands of civilians were killed, entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and the humanitarian crisis that followed displaced nearly 1 million people. The fighting showcased the complexities of modern warfare, where conventional armies struggled against a decentralized enemy deeply embedded in the urban landscape. In this episode, we will explore the strategic importance of Mosul, the brutal battle itself, and the lasting impact of one of the bloodiest urban conflicts in recent history. Historical context. The Islamic State's takeover of Mosul in June of 2014 was a turning point in the war against the extremist group. In a stunning and humiliating collapse, Iraqi security forces abandoned the city with little resistance, leaving behind a massive cache of weapons, vehicles, and resources. Within days, the Islamic State had solidified control, imposing its harsh rule on nearly 2 million residents. The city's capture boosted the group's global reputation, allowing its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, to declare the establishment of the so-called Islamic State from the historic Great Mosque of al-Nuri. Mosul was critical to the Islamic State's ambitions, serving as both a symbolic and logistical stronghold. As Iraq's second-largest city, it provided the group with a steady stream of recruits, tax revenue, and access to oil smuggling networks. Its location near Kurdish territory and key roadways made it an operational hub for Islamic State activities across Iraq and Syria. Reclaiming Mosul was not just about regaining territory. It was about dismantling the legitimacy of their so-called caliphate. Planning for the battle began in earnest in 2015, when Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi announced the government's intent to retake Mosul. However, the offensive was delayed multiple times due to the need for extensive preparation. The Iraqi military, still recovering from its collapse in 2014, required months of training and restructuring. Meanwhile, coalition airstrikes targeted key Islamic State positions, weakening their defenses ahead of the ground assault. Intelligence operations also played a vital role, gathering information on enemy fortifications, tunnel systems, and command structures. The coalition assembled for the battle was diverse and complex, comprising over 100,000 fighters. The Iraqi army and elite counterterrorism service spearheaded the assault, supported by Kurdish Peshmerga forces, federal police, and the Popular Mobilization Forces, which were a collection of predominantly Shiite militias. The United States and other international partners provided air support, intelligence, and special forces assistance. Despite their common goal, tensions among these groups, especially between the Iraqi government and Kurdish forces, complicated coordination efforts. The Islamic State had spent years preparing Mosul for a prolonged battle, transforming it into a fortress. The group dug extensive tunnel networks to move fighters undetected, placed thousands of improvised explosive devices throughout the city, and fortified key buildings. Civilians were forcibly kept in Mosul to serve as human shields, preventing indiscriminate coalition bombing. Many of the Islamic State's fighters, including foreign jihadists, were determined to fight to the death. As the battle loomed, it was clear that retaking Mosul would not be a swift operation. It would be a slow, grinding, and costly fight. The battle itself. On October 17, 2016, the long-awaited operation to liberate Mosul began. In the early hours of the morning, the Iraqi army, Kurdish Peshmerga, and various militias launched a coordinated assault on the outskirts of the city. Backed by heavy coalition airstrikes, ground forces advanced from multiple directions, first targeting villages and highways leading into Mosul. Islamic State fighters mounted a fierce defense using roadside bombs, suicide bombers, and sniper fire to slow the offensive. Despite this resistance, Iraqi forces made steady progress, securing several key positions within the first week. By late October, the battle had moved into the eastern districts of Mosul, where Iraqi troops encountered stiff opposition. The Islamic State had transformed the city into a deadly maze, lining streets with explosives and positioning fighters in narrow alleyways for ambush attacks. Suicide car bombers struck advancing Iraqi units, inflicting heavy casualties. The fighting quickly became a block-by-block struggle, with troops forced to clear houses and buildings one at a time. Progress slowed significantly as urban combat intensified, with Iraqi forces often taking days to secure a single neighborhood. The elite counterterrorism service played a pivotal role in the eastern Mosul offensive. Trained by United States Special Forces, these highly skilled fighters led the charge in the most dangerous areas. Their small unit tactics and adaptability proved essential in navigating the Islamic State's urban defenses. However, the brutal nature of the battle took its toll, with the counterterrorism service suffering significant casualties. Despite the losses, Iraqi forces steadily pushed forward, and by January of 2017, eastern Mosul was fully under government control. This victory marked a turning point, but the battle was far from over. The western half of the city remained in Islamic State hands. The offensive for western Mosul began in February of 2017, presenting even greater challenges. The western districts were denser, with older buildings and narrower streets that limited the movement of tanks and armored vehicles. Islamic State fighters used the terrain to their advantage, launching surprise attacks from hidden tunnels and utilizing rooftop snipers. The civilian casualties also surged, as the Islamic State forced residents to stay in their homes, preventing them from fleeing the battlefield. The humanitarian crisis worsened as food, water, and medical supplies dwindled. One of the defining moments of the battle came in June of 2017, when the Islamic State destroyed the Great Mosque of Al-Nuri. This historic site, where Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi had declared the caliphate in 2014, was reduced to rubble in an act of desperation. The destruction of the mosque was a symbolic defeat for the Islamic State, signaling their imminent collapse in Mosul. The battle then shifted to the Old City, where Islamic State fighters made their final stand. The narrow streets and closely packed buildings created a nightmarish battlefield, with intense fighting erupting at every corner. Tactical shifts became necessary as Iraqi forces adapted to the brutal urban combat. Small squads, often moving on foot, replaced large armored convoys to navigate the maze-like streets. Drones were increasingly used to scout enemy positions and call in airstrikes with pinpoint accuracy. Sniper teams played a critical role in countering the Islamic State's ambush tactics, picking off fighters hidden in the ruins. These adjustments allowed Iraqi troops to gradually close in on the last Islamic State strongholds. The final push into Mosul's Old City began in late June of 2017. The fighting here was some of the bloodiest of the entire campaign, with Islamic State militants refusing to surrender. They used civilians as human shields, executed those trying to escape, and launched suicide attacks to delay Iraqi advances. The destruction was immense, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble from artillery strikes and air bombardments. Despite the high cost, Iraqi forces pressed forward, determined to crush the last remnants of Islamic State resistance. Coalition air support remained a decisive factor in the battle, providing crucial strikes on fortified Islamic State positions. However, the reliance on air power also contributed to widespread devastation. Entire city blocks were flattened, and estimates suggest thousands of civilians perished in air and artillery strikes. The high civilian toll sparked controversy, raising questions about the balance between military necessity and humanitarian concerns. The battle for Mosul had turned into a war of attrition, where victory came at an enormous cost. By early July of 2017, the Islamic State's presence in Mosul was reduced to a few hundred fighters, trapped in a shrinking pocket of the old city. Many of these fighters were foreign jihadists who fought to the death rather than surrender. Iraqi troops methodically cleared the remaining buildings, engaging in fierce hand-to-hand combat in the final days of the battle. As resistance crumbled, surviving Islamic State members attempted to flee or blend in with the civilian population, but many were captured or killed. On July 10, 2017, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi officially declared victory in Mosul. The announcement marked the end of a 9-month campaign that had cost thousands of lives and left the city in ruins. While celebrations erupted in Baghdad and other parts of Iraq, Mosul itself remained a scene of devastation. Bodies still lay buried under collapsed buildings, and much of the city's infrastructure was destroyed. The battle was won, but the road to rebuilding Mosul had only just begun. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scale of the destruction. Estimates suggest that over 10,000 civilians died, though the exact number remains uncertain. More than 900,000 residents were displaced, many of whom had nowhere to return. Entire neighborhoods were unrecognizable, and the humanitarian crisis persisted long after the fighting had stopped. Mosul had been liberated, but the scars of war would linger for years to come. Outcome and immediate impact. The Battle of Mosul ended with a decisive military victory for Iraq and its allies, but at an immense cost. The Islamic State was completely driven from the city, marking one of the most significant territorial losses for the extremist group. However, the devastation left in the wake of the battle was staggering. Much of Mosul lay in ruins, with entire districts reduced to rubble from months of airstrikes, artillery bombardment, and intense urban combat. The city's infrastructure, roads, bridges, hospitals, and schools had been nearly obliterated, leaving the remaining population in dire need of assistance. The human toll of the battle was equally harrowing. Conservative estimates suggest that at least 10,000 civilians perished, though some reports place the number even higher. Many were killed by the Islamic State during the occupation or in the final weeks of intense fighting. Thousands more died in airstrikes or were caught in crossfire as they attempted to flee. Iraqi military and coalition forces also suffered heavy casualties, with estimates indicating that at least 1,200 Iraqi troops and 8,000 Islamic State fighters were killed. The high death toll highlighted the brutal nature of the battle and the complexities of fighting in a densely populated urban environment. Politically, the victory in Mosul was a major milestone for Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, who declared the city liberated on July 10, 2017. The win bolstered the Iraqi government's position both domestically and internationally, demonstrating that the Islamic State could be defeated through coordinated military action. However, the battle also exposed deep-seated challenges within Iraq, including sectarian tensions, governance issues, and the difficulty of reintegrating a war-torn population. The Iraqi government now faced the daunting task of rebuilding not just Mosul, but also public confidence in its ability to govern effectively. The Islamic State, though defeated in Mosul, was far from eradicated. The group quickly transitioned from a territorial force to an insurgency, launching sporadic attacks across Iraq. Suicide bombings, ambushes, and targeted assassinations became common tactics as the Islamic State sought to maintain relevance. The loss of Mosul significantly weakened the group's operational capabilities, but its ideology and influence persisted, continuing to pose a security threat across the region. The battle had won a critical victory on the battlefield, but the ideological fight against extremism remained an ongoing struggle. Rebuilding Mosul in the aftermath of the battle proved to be an overwhelming challenge. With over 900,000 people displaced, humanitarian organizations scrambled to provide aid, but the scale of destruction made recovery slow and difficult. Essential services such as water, electricity, and healthcare were virtually non-existent in many parts of the city. Clearing unexploded ordnance and improvised explosive devices left behind by the Islamic State added another layer of complexity to the rebuilding effort. While efforts to restore Mosul began almost immediately, progress was uneven, and for many residents, the scars of war remained a daily reality. Legacy and analysis. The liberation of Mosul dealt a significant blow to the Islamic State, marking the beginning of the end for their territorial control in Iraq. The loss of their largest urban stronghold shattered the group's claim of a functioning caliphate and disrupted their ability to conduct large-scale military operations. However, while the Islamic State lost territory, the ideology that fueled its rise remained intact. The battle forced the group to adapt, shifting its tactics from open warfare to insurgency, relying on sleeper cells and guerrilla-style attacks across Iraq and Syria. Even in the years following Mosul's liberation, the Islamic State maintained a presence in rural areas, proving that military victory alone was not enough to eliminate the threat. The battle also provided critical lessons in urban warfare that reshaped military strategy worldwide. The complexity of fighting in a densely populated city, where an entrenched enemy used civilians as shields, highlighted the limitations of conventional warfare tactics. Coalition forces had to adapt, integrating drone surveillance, precision airstrikes, and small unit tactics to counter the Islamic State's defenses. The experience of Mosul has since influenced military doctrine, with many nations reassessing how to conduct urban combat operations while minimizing civilian casualties and infrastructure damage. For Iraq, the victory in Mosul was both a triumph and a test of resilience. While the defeat of the Islamic State was a moment of national unity, deep divisions remained between Iraq's various factions. The battle exposed tensions between the central government, Kurdish forces, and Shiite militias, which had fought together against the Islamic State but had competing interests in post-war Iraq. The destruction of Mosul also raised pressing questions about reconstruction, governance, and the prevention of future extremist uprisings. If the underlying economic and political grievances that contributed to the Islamic State's rise were not addressed, Iraq risked facing a new cycle of instability. More broadly, the battle underscored the evolving nature of modern warfare, where non-state actors can challenge conventional militaries in prolonged, high-intensity conflicts. The lessons of Mosul extend beyond Iraq, serving as a case study for future conflicts involving extremist groups embedded within urban populations. The cost of the battle, both in human lives and in the physical destruction of an entire city, serves as a sobering reminder of the challenges nations face in confronting terrorism and rebuilding in the aftermath of war. The Battle of Mosul was a turning point in the fight against the Islamic State, proving that the group's so-called caliphate was unsustainable in the face of coordinated military opposition. However, the victory came at a tremendous cost. Thousands of lives were lost, and the city itself was left in ruins. The battle demonstrated the resilience of Iraqi forces and the determination of coalition partners, but it also exposed the immense challenges of urban warfare and post-conflict recovery. For many Mosul residents, liberation was bittersweet, as survival came with the burden of rebuilding shattered homes and lives. Beyond its immediate consequences, Mosul serves as a lasting example of both the triumph and tragedy of modern war. The military success against the Islamic State was undeniable, yet the scars of battle remain, reminding the world that defeating an enemy on the battlefield is only part of the struggle. The deeper fight against extremism, instability, and the conditions that allow groups like the Islamic State to rise continues long after the last shots are fired. The story of Mosul is not just about victory, but about resilience, sacrifice, and the long road to recovery that follows in war's wake. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the TrackPass podcast. Don't forget to check out the TrackPass online newsletter, where we take things to the next level with multimedia content. Each issue features fascinating and informative photos, videos, and articles that bring the stories of military life to you in a dynamic and engaging way. Be sure to subscribe at trackpass.com to stay informed and entertained. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the incredible world of military history and life.